goes over to this thing called administration. You have TASA and TASB and the ESCs, and there are 3 or 4 other these organizations. It's the administration side, where we used to have in Texas 5 teachers and 1 administrator. Today, what we have is 1 teacher and 1 administrator. And the sad part is that this group that's over here in the administration side, they make about 20% more than the teachers do over here. And yet they keep clamoring for more money and more money. Now and Texas is low on the national totem pole on education, which is affecting our business in the future. So we need to raise our standards and get back to teaching the basics. The problem we have with the new education that's come into Texas, where we had C-Scope, and now we're going to have Common Core, and whatever the other 2 or 3 others that have that systems that are designed by the left. These come from the left, and what they're doing, and it's indoctrination of the kids as opposed to education. And that's what we need to have is our SBOE at the state level, making sure that the kids are being taught the basics and not all of the esoteric stuff that is brought in. Yes.
Yes. I have a couple things I'd like to present to you. One is illegal jelly bean immigration. One of the things that occurs with that, the governor and the legislature allows $100,000 to pay for university training. I don't believe we should be paying $100,000 for illegal to go to the state schools on the education side. Secondly, I spent a lot of years in Europe, and they have a piggyback system in their rail system. Now, the next session, I suspect, will have a huge impact on the transportation program in the state of Texas. I propose a truck system where trucks are coming out of Mexico and South America come up to the border, they get on a train, and take them to key points, maybe Austin, Dallas, Fort Worth, El Paso, and to the state border. But let's get our rail system in effect, a solid rail system, get the trucks off the road, because we don't need all those illegal trucks coming in that's weak on insurance and weak on mechanics. But like I said, put the trucks on the train. They can pick them up in Oklahoma, Louisiana, Colorado, wherever we want to. But let's get a solid train trunk system going in the state of Texas. I think it would be cost effective in the long run.
Okay. Well, there's a lot of changes or things we're inflicted with as a result of NAFTA and other changes that were made at the federal level that Texas doesn't have control over, and of course that is the borders of what's happening with commerce. But I would agree with you that we are going to have a greater problem with trucks coming out of Mexico than what we have now.
Education.
I had 2 questions for you, but I came in late. Maybe you already answered my first question. But 2 questions. First one, you are for life, correct? For life.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. From
Well,
the moment of conception till God decides it's time to end it.
Okay. Well, you know that the federal judge just overruled what we just passed, this past legislative session. Okay. So we have another lawsuit against the federal government. Attorney General Greg Abbott, I think, has at least 30 or 31 now lawsuits against the federal government for its overreach. We can see that this is costing us time and money.
knew you were gonna ask that question.
So you're prepared.
Um, and it's a serious one. I don't mean that in light at all, because we do have a serious problem. But I do not think we can solve the problems that we have by separating. It didn't work before. The burdens of doing it and what would happen, I think we could, with the same amount of energy, if we start being a state in terms of state as it's defined in the Constitution, and standing by our rights as a state, that we can accomplish the same thing. We have the power of nullification, but we don't use it. Instead, what we do is we go with lawsuits. And I think that with a confederation of states agreeing to work and doing the same thing, that we can achieve the same similar goals. But just by separating, we still have to elect the people in office. If we have a problem electing people now as a state, it isn't going to make any difference as a separate nation. We will still elect those people who have bad behavior. What we've got to really change is our attitude towards how we put people in office and who we put there and how long we leave them. That's the way we solve this problem. We solve it in Washington and we solve it here by the people taking their personal responsibility that they have to go to the box and to vote, to pay attention to what people do in office. We suffer from the two biggest diseases, ignorance and apathy. That's what lies at the bottom of this. That and our drift from the Judeo-Christian values on which this country was founded. If we come back to being the Christian nation that was intended to be, if we took serious our responsibility to elect people, to hold them accountable. I mean, I could go down and ask questions about what's been going on in Austin. It's almost like the Jay Leno thing of people on the street asking people, because nobody knows, but nobody pays attention to what's going on. But I think if we would do that, we wouldn't have to go through what it would take to be as a separate nation. I think we can do it within the system. Yes.
I've heard several variations of why you dropped out of the last election, and I think it would be best to hear it directly from you. Exactly why did you abandon the last election?
Okay, you used a couple of words there that are not quite correct. I did not drop out.
Correct me, please.
Okay, I did not drop out, and I did not abandon. I was taken off the ballot by the Republican Party. They removed me just before 6 o'clock on March the 9th, which was the last day that you could file. And they did so because my opponent brought to their attention a technical error that I had made on the application. And in that application, I did not put down sufficient time to have had 5 years residency in Texas to be a state senator. It's the only elected position in the state that has a 5-year requirement. It was an error I made. When I was filling it out, I was thinking about moving from Rockwall down to Van Zandt County, and I wasn't thinking about the 5-year requirement, and that's what I put on there. I submitted that application on the 15th of December, and I called them, I sent it on the 14th, called them on the morning of the 15th, sent it by FedEx to make sure that it was okay. And I was on the phone with one of the staff when they opened the package and looked at it. It's what they're supposed to do. And I asked him, is everything okay? Is my application acceptable? And he says, yep, the check is right. Your application is complete. Everything is fine. A couple of weeks later, I got a letter from them saying that they were sending my name over to the Election Commission to have my name put on the ballot. Then we got the extension. And if you recall, we had the delay. Well, in that delay, they opened up for people then to refile. It was just for a few days, it was less than a week. In that window of time, which ended on March 9th at 6 o'clock, my opponent had learned this shortly, sometime in January, when he went down to just to look at my application, and waited until it was too late for me to respond. Now, the Republican Party did not have to take me off. They chose to do that. That was a decision that they could do. They could have waited until Monday and said, hey, we got an application here that's not right. Is there, because the courts in 2006 changed how they made what it meant. Up until 2006, that error that I made on there absolutely would take me off the docket. No matter what the truth was, the error on that application would have meant you're done. It doesn't matter what the truth, what the real facts are. After 2006, a case that was conducted by Kelly Shackelford, the courts ruled that the technicality of filling out the form does not override the facts. So I could have gone to court, or I would have had to go to court to get back on the ballot because they took me off, and once the deadline came, I was not on the ballot. The only way I could get back on was to go to court, and that was going to cost anywhere from $60,000 to $250,000, depending on how he wanted to fight. He had plenty of money just to run it right on up to the Supreme Court, no matter how they ruled. So at that point, I chose not to spend the money. I didn't have the money to begin with to even do that. And so I was off the ballot, and I tried to do it as an independent. Could not get back on the ballot as an independent. Could not even get on as a write-in because they had changed the rules such that March 9th was the deadline for everything. Whether you're an independent, Republican, Democrat, independent, write-in, all were at the same time. It was not possible to get back on without having to go through the court.
Have you been a citizen for 5 years?
Yes. Yes, I have. Absolutely. And I have reviewed the material with the attorney at the Texas Election Commission and other attorneys. Yes, sir.
One other thing, I concur with you on our gas tax. That should be used strictly for roads and transportation issues. But we also have a problem with the 50 cents we pay each month on our telephone bills. There's billions of dollars in our account down there that should be used for emergency 911 and all the things that go with that. Alarms, warning systems. But that money is being taken out and put into the general fund and not being utilized for the purpose it's designed to on a monthly basis. We pay 50 cents. And that should be dedicated strictly for emergency management instead of
And if we don't need to use it there, then we ought to get rid of the tax. That's part of what I was talking about, truth in taxation. Collect it for a purpose, use it for that purpose, or get rid of the tax. You don't collect it for one thing and just throw it in the general fund to be used for whatever they happen to dream up.
And then the cities are being turned around and they're being charged to have 911 when there's money down there, in addition to what citizens in the county pay.
Yes, sir.
Could you address a little bit about this Proposition 6 that being pushed to expand the water?
Oh, okay, sure will. The work that's being proposed in Proposition 6 is valid work. We do have a water problem in Texas in the future that we need to address. We need to be looking at what we do for the future, absolutely. But that particular proposition is like many bills in Austin and in Washington. It's a good idea wrapped in a bad package. And it's the kind of thing that we should say no to and let them do it right. It needs to be done, but they ought to do it right. They should not be using the rainy day fund to fund this study. There was money there to do it. There is money there to do it. They do not need to take it out of the rainy day fund. And my opinion, I think we need to vote no on it and send it back to Austin and tell them, to give us another one, but fund it right. Oh, nobody misunderstood me there, did you? Okay.
Yeah, I was frustrated with Prop 6 also. It's a government solution to a problem. Now, it takes 10 to 20 years to get a permit to build a reservoir. And I was pretty frustrated that our Republican representatives, all they offered us was a government solution to a problem. They didn't offer to reduce the amount of years it takes to get a permit to build a reservoir. They just want to take money from rainy day fund. And I don't know. I mean, do you have any ideas? Have you thought anything about it?
Oh, I think, all of the other part of that, the numbers that I've seen used, all are skewed to make the problem look worse than it is. I think we will have one eventually if the population keeps growing the way it is. But they do things that make it look worse than what it needs to. And I think there are other solutions, not just the reservoir. As an example, our solutions are either, reservoirs or the aquifers. That's the only, the two places to get it. And of course, there are others that talk about the recycling, but I don't even talk about that one. But they talk against the reservoirs because they talk about the huge evaporation rate, that we lose so much water to evaporation. Well, if you look around Texas, we've got a lot of surface water in Texas. We've got a lot of surface water, but it's all real shallow. But the land has been paid for. The big cost of acquiring the land has already been incurred. Why not look at making those reservoirs deeper, holds more water, and you don't increase the evaporation rate. It changes. The evaporation rate is a function of the surface. So you don't change the surface, you just make them deeper. And you can gain a great deal of water about that. I brought that up in several meetings, and I kind of get the idiot treatment answer from the folks. They don't want to address that because that's a
Like with the
cheap
gas
way to do it.
tax 40 years ago, or however long, they said it was going to fix our problems at a 40-year plan. Well, why do they know so much more about the next 40 years than they did 40 years ago when they did the gas tax? They're off. Things change. So anyway.
Would you address the toll roads? What was your thinking on the toll roads?
Pay as you go. Pay as you go. We don't need to be selling them off to foreign companies and then funding them ourselves like we've been doing with Century. And we need to put toll roads based on traffic and congestion, not on where someone wants to put a road. If it's not viable, if it's not going to take in enough money to pay for it, then maybe we don't really need that road there.
Well, they have that problem. They have fire, just go bankrupt.
Oh yeah, no, that's the problem we've got. And looking at trying to put tolls on existing roads, to use that as leverage to borrow money to build other roads, we don't need to do that. What we need to do is take a look at, one, take the money associated with vehicles and use it for roads. We've got sales tax that goes off into the general fund on automobiles. We take the sales tax, we take the balance of the gasoline tax, and we've got enough money to do most of what needs to be done with roads. But then again, they say, oh, but they need that money over there. Well, let's look at where we're spending that money that we don't need to be spending. How about the $250 million that went to Formula One racing? We got 254 counties in Texas. I bet every one of those school districts could have used another $1 million. Or the $500 million in the slush fund. That's another $2 million going for education. Folks, there's plenty of places where money is being spent that doesn't need to be spent. Look at the money that was squandered on cancer research with our technology program, yet we continue to fund that. $129 million going to Hollywood to make movies here. I mean, there is plenty of money being spent inappropriately that could replace it if we take the money for the sales tax and the gasoline tax and use it on roads. And build toll roads where their demand is going to be high enough that they'll collect money to pay for it. And you pay for the road and you take the toll off. You need another road somewhere else, you build the road and do the same thing. Yes.
On the county level, the lateral road funds from the state that we receive from the county hasn't hardly changed at all since 1953. There needs to be a push in the legislature to give counties more money to do our county roads. There's just not enough tax dollars out here to bring them up to standard. There's still wagon trails is all they are in most of these counties, including your county, Van Zandt, and ours. They're wagon trails. They line up barely with 2 cars on. We need more of our tax dollars and gasoline taxes coming back to the county.
Now, believe me, from Van Zandt County, I know what bad roads are like. I know what they're like. And it is something I've talked about before because we spend a lot of money at the state level that can be used at the county to balance things out. We end up repaving a lot of roads I think, every time I turn around, they're repaving 64 between Canton and Tyler, and I've yet to see a pothole in that road. But I agree with you. I think there needs to be a state plan for how we take care of our roads. CC? Yep. Another question?
I know there's been a lot of talk about property taxes, doing away with them. We went to a meeting down there in Austin a couple of years ago, actually, and the people there are all for it, and I am too, because, but how do you do
To eliminate property tax?
Yes.
Yes. I think the more we move towards a total consumption tax, the fairer it becomes. I think the issue of us renting our property from the government, which is all we're doing as long as we have to pay property tax, we're just renting it from them. And the founding fathers, they really intended that property was, that is the basis for liberty. That's the basis for freedom. If you can't own property, you don't have true liberty. You don't have true freedom. I think a restructuring where we go to the consumption tax, that way the people with a lot of money who buy a lot of stuff, they'll pay taxes. It will get to answering this question everybody hollers about, fair share. The system we have doesn't get to the fair share, but we can do it. Yes, guys.
Getting back to the water, Proposition 6. As a water person, I urge you to vote against it. In Proposition 2, 2 years ago, set up a fund of several billions of dollars, and it hasn't been touched. It's still there. Now they want to set up another one, and it won't be touched. But we need that money to stay in the rainy day fund.
The Gus is on $6 billion is sitting there. $6 billion is sitting in that fund.
Bob, I like the idea of making the reservoirs deeper so you can actually run a boat in it.
Yeah.
Without hitting a tree.
Yeah.
Bob, I have a question about our borders.
Yes.
We have a real problem getting the federal government to do their job as their constitutional duty to defend and protect the borders of the states. They've declared war on Texas as far as I'm concerned, concerning our borders. They ship illegals all the way to El Paso and turn them loose. And when darn well they're turn around and come right back and get into Texas rather than Arizona, New Mexico, and California where they gather them up product. What would you think about us militarizing our own state guard, which is only under the authority of the governor, and using them to police our borders?
Well, I think in addition to us protecting ourselves, I think we have every right to, and I think that we should be doing more than we're doing now. But I think we also ought to need to be looking at how we can shut down what I call the candy stores, the attractions that bring them here, and that will go a long way to reducing coming across the border illegally, because they're coming here for what they're gonna get when they get here. If they don't have something to come here for, they're not gonna be coming.
I'm not so much worried about the illegal who crosses over here to better his life or his family.
Yeah.
The ones I'm worried about are those that strap those bombs around their chest and are coming across our border. We have tons of Arabs and
I understand.
Islamists.
You're absolutely right. The reason I say that is, that makes the border security problem a true security problem with fewer people to have to deal with. Coming across the border is kind of hard to tell which is which in there, and you have the quantity, while you're out there rounding up the quantity. You reduce the quantity coming across by taking away the candy store. Then you use the law enforcement to stop them from coming. Yes, I think we need to do a whole lot more, because the crime is growing. Human trafficking and as a crime is growing.
well, our ranchers on the border having to deal with the cartels coming across too now. So there's a real danger down there.
It is.
It used to be addressed almost.
It's not just in the ranches. It's in the construction industry. The Mexican mafia, the cartels are in the construction industry now. We do need to do more. Yes, ma'am.
How big a problem is it for out-of-state money coming in to help elect our governor?
You talking about past elections or future elections?
Well,
It's going to be a bigger problem, and let me just let me address that. But the term Texas blue. The question is, her question had to do with out-of-state money influencing our governor's race, or races in general. Yes, there is a lot of money. I found a huge amount of money from outside the district that went to my opponent in the last election. And I'll look at it after the first year and see what we have here. But don't discount the Democrats' effort to turn Texas blue. Because let me tell you how they can do it. And it's a bona fide threat. We think about Texas. Think about picture the map, a map of Texas. Now put red dots on the Republicans and all the communities around the state, and put blue dots on where the Democrats are. And you've mostly have seen that picture. It's going to look red, except in the heart of Houston and San Antonio and Austin, down along the border and Dallas. It's blue. The rest of the rural Texas is all red, right? What is the biggest employer in rural Texas? School system. The schools are the biggest employer. Where on the political spectrum are folks in education in general? Here are superintendents. They tend to lean to the left. We wouldn't be having the stuff we're being taught in school today if they didn't. So they lean to the left. Now they may be voting Republican or have been, but what do they want? They want more money in the school system, particularly the superintendents. They never get enough. They always want more. Wendy Davis has already announced how she's running. She's running on education. She's running on federal education money. She is going to not be like Perry was and turn down that federal money. She's going to go after it. She's going to get those schools that money they want. She's going to get them that so they can get whatever they want in the schools. Think about what that's going to do to the superintendents and the teachers when they have that choice of, hey, here's somebody that can do this. That's a real threat, folks, because it won't take many of them to cross over that in the past have voted Republican and vote Democrat at the governor's level, and because the overwhelming majority of Democrats vote straight ticket, her coattails could draw a lot of Democrats into the state and into our congressional offices that otherwise wouldn't happen. So don't kid yourself that she is not a real threat. She's the ideal media candidate. She will be the darling of the media. And then her message will get through to possibly to the voters. The one thing we can hope for is that the message of being the baby killer will resonate with enough people that they won't buy into it. Those are strong words, but that's exactly what it is.
And
Yes.
that goes with the immigration reforms. I mean, as far as going blue, I mean, you're talking about the border and bringing
Yes.
it in. That's really encouraging.
Very
It's
much
gonna really
so.
help making it the blue wave.
Oh, yes. No, it will. And see, and once Texas goes, the country's gone. Texas is the only thing that's standing between Barack Obama and the Democrats and completely consuming the country. With the Texas electoral votes, I mean, there aren't enough other swing states to make the difference. And there aren't. All right, Cece had.
Well, I was gonna say, we just have to remind everybody about, she's Abortion Barbie, that's her name. That's her name.
Absolutely.
Abortion Barbie. And then for the people who were down there, during all of that legislative, chaos, the people, the Democrats, the liberals that were bussed in there and paid were chanting, "Hail Satan."
Yeah.
And I think, and that is the truth, and I think if we can keep that front row and center, she won't have a chance.
Oops. Yes, sir.
Question, does the state of Texas have the authority to do away with straight party voting?
Yes, that could be passed as a, I mean, it's been brought up in the past, but, no, in the general.
Electoral.
In the general election. What I was talking
Electoral
about,
college.
the straight ticket, is what happened in Dallas. I mean, Dallas County just had a dismal turnout. Hey, folks, pathetic, 7% in Dallas County. But there were actually enough Republican voters in Dallas to have elected all the Republicans on the ticket in the last election. But Republicans are too smart to, we won't vote for somebody if we don't know who they are. So Republican will go in the voting booth and they'll vote for the president, maybe the senator and the rep that they know, and then maybe one or two others, but they stop about halfway down. All those down ballots, all those judges, all those SBOE, all those people that are treasurer, et cetera, commissioners and so on down there, they didn't get any Republican votes. There were enough Republicans who went into booths to do it, but they didn't get the votes. Democrats, they're trained from birth. All you do is pull the big D. That's it. Okay. And so, but our race, this one right here, this one's going to be decided in the primary. It's the primary. Early voting starts like the 18th of February.
And last primary, there was only 8% turnout in the primary.
Well, speaking of voting, have you read what the Supreme Court decided on the Arizona case concerning the voting? What was it? They had a bill or passed a law saying you had to show proof of citizenship in order to vote in Arizona. The Supreme Court struck that down today, 7-2. That's going to have huge ramifications across all of the border states now. And that's not legislation. It's not
Well,
the
that
Supreme Court.
if they voted against having to show citizenship, that's not a problem here in Texas. You do not have anywhere along the way have to show citizenship to get a voter, to be able to vote in Texas. You have to show an ID, but you do not have to, because you can get a driver's license without showing citizenship. In Texas, the only requirement associated with citizenship is self-certification. On the little card, you have to check the box that says, I'm a citizen. That is the proof. That's the end of it. There are no birth certificates, there's nothing. So we don't have proof of citizenship in Texas for voting.
So anybody can just say, I'm a citizen.
That's right.
As long as they got an ID.
Yeah. Well, and then they get the driver's license by just going and getting the driver's license.
Understand.
So,
Problem.
Okay, I passed out some cards there, folks. I